بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآله
وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين جل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم. اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. خب, alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to resume our study of Al-Fiqh al-Istidlali after the holy months of Ramadan. The last session was session 38. We had it on 19th of March. And we discussed from page 440 to 447. And this is now 447. We reached furu'. As you remember, discussion, it was about qadha, for fasting. Al-awwal hukm as-sabi, about young children who have not reached the age of puberty or bulugh. Do they need to do qadha afterwards or no? Sheikh Irwani says, لا يجب قضاء ما فات فترة الصبا بلا خلاف. Without any disagreement, our fuqaha believe that qadha for what is missed during childhood before bulugh is not necessary. وَيَدُلُّ عَلَيْهِ. Of course, this might be badihi, maybe it doesn't need reasoning, but if someone needs argument, we can say, first of all, al-asl ba'da al-qusur fil-muqtadi. If there is no muqtazi for qadha, you don't have reason to prove that qadha is necessary. So what is asl? Asl is adamul wujub. Yeah, unless you can prove that something is wajib, qa'idatul bara'a says that you should assume there is no wujub. So this is tabqa asl, we say. It means according to the main principle. It means according to the main condition. إما لعدم تمامية كبرى وجوب قضاء كل ما فات, either because you believe in a general way, as we discussed, that we don't have such idea, we cannot establish such idea that any fasting which is missed needs qadha. We don't have such a general rule. If there is need for qadha, it has to be established case by case. I mean, condition by condition, not case meaning individual. I mean, conditions. For example, to say someone who was healthy and was not traveling, didn't fast, must do it. But to say any fasting which is missed, even by a child, or by a person who was mad, or by a person who was not conscious, needs qadha. We don't have such general principle. It's such kubra. Kubra is the major premise in qiyas, in deduction, yeah? So this is not established. Either because of this, so we have problem with the general idea, or لأنها لو تمت, or we can say even if we accept such kubra, that if fasting is missed, qadha is necessary as a general rule, we say here you cannot say fasting is missed. Both, if you say no, qadha or mafat is necessary, okay, we cannot say for a child that fatahu som. Fat should be for someone who was in a condition of fasting. Okay? أو لأنها لو تمت, even if this kubra was complete, فموضوعها, its subject is what? Al-Fawt, يعني يجب القضاء على من فاته الصوم. Yeah. خب هذا يعني this doesn't apply to child. الذي ليس بالصادق في حق الصبي. Because who said Sabi should fast? So that we say the general assumption or main condition, for example, for fasting is that child must do or should do fasting. No, there is no such thing. In addition to this, we can add another point. This issue is a very common issue. Every generation of Muslims and followers of Ahlul Bayt were faced with this issue because every human being starts with childhood as a child. If there was such a ruling that a child must do qada for all those 9 or 15 years for boys, 15 years for girl 9. So all the years before that, like 8 years for girls, for example, of course, sometimes can be 9, depending when the child was born. And around 14, 15, for example, for the boy. If there was such an obligation that these children had to fast, it would have become very well known. لو كان القضاء ثابتا لاشتهر, because it is ammatul balwa. It is something that all people are faced with. This balwa here means ibtila. Is ammatul ibtila or kathirul ibtila. All people, even it's more than kathir, it's because every person starts as a child. So many people should have asked about this. As I said, actually, this is very obvious that child doesn't need to do qadha. The second fara is majnoon. What is hukmul majnoon? Someone who has no aql. لا خلاف في عدم وجوب القضاء على المجنون بعد عود العقل إليه. If he is majnoon for ever, of course, one of the conditions of taklif is aql. So this person has no taklif. The question is someone who used to be majnoon and then, alhamdulillah, he's healed. He has now his rational capacity like others. So does he need to do qadha of previous years that he was mad? Again here, la khilafa. There is no disagreement في عدم وجوب القضاء على المجنون بعد عود العقل إليه. That majnoon, after aql comes back to him, doesn't need to do qadha. وقد يتمسك لذلك بالنصوص الإغماء الآتية. Al-Atiyah is adjective for nusus. So sometimes for majnoon, they argue from the texts which are related to ighma. When someone is unconscious, they say it's similar, junoon and ighma. But Shaykh Irwani says, لكن الأولى التمسك بها للتأييد. But it's better not to argue because maybe someone says it's qiyas. We can say this can be support, or maybe we don't need actually this. We can say it's as extra support, as ta'id, not as a dalil. What is the best dalil? Al-munasib التمسك بالأصل بعد القصور في المقتضي. As we said about child, when muqtazi for wujub is not established, asl is adamul wujub. Al-asala is for adamul wujub. So qadha is not wajib. الثالث حكم المغمى عليه من أغمي عليه. مغمى عليه من أغمي, who went unconscious. الكلام تارة في الإغماء القهري وأخرى في الاختياري. Sometimes someone out of his own decision, for example, he goes and agrees with the doctor and hospital that, you can make me unconscious during the day of months of Ramadan, for example, or another time, for example, that he was fasting. But our discussion is about months of Ramadan. So during the months of Ramadan, he agrees to have surgery and they make him unconscious. So it's ikhtiyari. But sometimes it's qahri, means it's not intentional, it's unintentional. It happens. This person is ill, for example, or has an accident, he goes unconscious. Amma al-qahri, we discuss each of them separately. Al-qahri, al-ighma al-qahri. Qahri means it happens without this person's decision. Unintentional. فالمشهور عدم وجوب قضاء ما فات فترة الإغماء. What is mashhur, what is more famous and more established and more accepted among our scholars and jurists and mujtahids is that qadha is not necessary for those things which are missed when someone was unconscious. So during fatratul ighma, during that period of ighma, anything which is missed doesn't need to be done as qadha. Opposite to mashhur, we have other scholars. ونسب الخلاف إلى المفيد رضوان الله تعالى عليه والمرتضى سيد المرتضى رضوان الله تعالى عليه والسلار وابن البراج رضوان الله تعالى عليهم أنهم, it is attributed to them that فصلوا, they believe in tafsil. So they make distinction between two conditions. In one, qadha is not necessary. In the other one, qadha is necessary. When qadha is necessary, according to them, they differ from mashhur, because mashhur said qadha is not necessary at all. And these ulama, Mufid, Murtada, etc., who are غير المشهور, فصلوا بينما إذا تحققت النية قبل الإغماء فلا يجب وإلا وجب. They say, if this person, before he became unconscious, for example, he became unconscious 9 o'clock in the morning, and he had niyyah of fasting, or even if it was earlier, anyway, in the night before, he had niyyah of fasting. But mostly must be, I think, based on their argument, that was with niyyah of fasting and maybe did a little of fasting, then went unconscious. They say here, fasting is okay. And there is no need for qadha. But if he had no niyyah, qadha is needed. When we discuss the arguments of mashhur, you understand this غير mashhur better. Sheikh Irwani says, al-munasib ma alayhi al-mashhur. What is more plausible and suitable is what mashhur says, that qadha is not necessary for mughma alayh at all. لِوُجُوهٍ ثَلَاثَةٍ. We mentioned 3 points, the arguments. Number one, the famous one that we said, the Sabi and Majnoon, al-asl ba'd al-qusur fi al-muqtadi. When muqtazi for wujub is not complete, what is asl? Asalatu adam al-wujub. Number two, qaida, there's a rule. We mentioned this before. كُلَّمَا غَلَبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَى صَاحِبِ شَيْءٍ. Anything that happens by Allah without your choice, without your control, Allah was dominant and he did it, then the person to whom this has happened has no responsibility, no taklif. لَيْسَ عَلَى صَاحِبِهِ شَيْءٌ. So if someone, for example, becomes unconscious, and this was done to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it was out of his control. Of course, we say by Allah means out of, it wasn't, without his control. Doesn't mean that Allah wanted this. Maybe someone had accident, etc. But basically, according to Tawheed Afali, we can attribute this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, itlaq of this rule, kullama ghalaba Allah alayh, includes ighma. Of course, you may say, what about ikhtiyari? Here, you cannot say غلب الله عليه. We talk about it. ثالثها, the third argument. صحيحة أيوب بن نوح. Remember this صحيحة, because this is what we need for saying that there is no wujub. We have some other things that indicate wujub, we will discuss later. Ayyub ibn Nu says, كتبت إلى أبي الحسن الثالث. Abu al-Hasan al-Thalith means Imam Hadi alayhi salam. Okay? He says, I wrote to Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, أسأله عن المغمى عليه يوما أو أكثر. I asked him about someone who went unconscious for a day or more than a day. هل يقضي ما فاته أم لا? Does he do غذا for what he has missed or not? فكتب عليه السلام. Because they didn't have easy access to Imam, many times they used to send messages in writing. Imam alayhi salam wrote back, لا يقضي الصوم ولا يقضي الصلاة. Neither he does qadha of fasting nor for salat. وغيرها, other than this sahih, غيرها, يعني غير صحيحة أيوب ibn No. So we mentioned three reasons that when someone is مغمي عليه or مغمى عليه, doesn't need qadha. But there are two hadiths which have conflict with these points. They seem to suggest that there is a need for qadha. Qadha is obligatory. But we will discuss sanad and dalala. إحداهما, one of the riwayatain, إحداهما means إحدى الروايتين, صحيحة to Mansur ibn Hazim. So there is no problem with the sanad. The dalala must be checked. And Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, سأله عن المغمى عليه شهرا أو 40 ليلة. Imam alayhi salam was asked by Mansur ibn Hazim about someone who was unconscious for a month or 40 days. Imam alayhi salam, according to this, replied, إن شئت أخبرتك بما آمر به نفسي وولدي or ولدي. If you like, I tell you what I, make it as obligation for myself and my children or my progeny. Means I take it as something necessary for me. In such cases that you miss something, you should do qadha. And taqdi kulla ma fataka. Anything that you miss, is it roze, fasting, is it salat, or anything else that you miss. Reply to this is, you have two sahih here. One is Sahihah to Ayyub ibn Nu, who wrote to Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam. It was very clear, La yaqdi as-sawm wa la yaqdi as-salat. There is no wujub. In the second one, Imam says, I make it necessary for myself and my children that we do qadha. So when you put them together, what do you understand? You understand that Imam is doing something which is not wajib, maybe it's mustahab or as ihtiyat, but it's not wajib, because the other one clearly says there is no wujub. When one hadith says there is no wujub, it's very sarih, very explicit. The other one says, we do it, do it. Well, the only way to have jami' or fi, to reconcile and say there is no ta'aruz or conflict, is to say that it's not wajib, but it's better to do it. الجواب أولا أن صحيحة أيوب ibn Nuh المتقدمة, which we discussed it before, صريحة في نفي الوجوب. It's very explicit, very clear that there is no wujub. ولازمه, and its implication is that we should interpret Sahih Mansur as mustahab, referring to istihbab. Why? للقاعدة الأولى. There's a common sense rule. كلما اجتمع صريح وظاهر متنافيان. Whenever we have two texts, one is explicit, one is ظاهر, but not explicit. Nas is not nas. You know the difference. You know, we said every text is either mujmal or mubayyan. Mubayyan is either nas or ظاهر. You remember this. خب كلما اجتمع صريح وظاهر متنافيان أول الظاهر لحساب الصريح. Because of the text which is sarih, we do ta'wil of zahir. So we interpret zahir in the way that doesn't conflict with sarih. When one hadith says there is no wujub, the other one says, for example, do this, I do it, my children do it. So, if we didn't have anything, you could say maybe it means wujub. But when there is hadith which says it's not wajib, so this means that we do it voluntarily. We want to do ihtiyat, we don't want to miss any sawab, we do it as a mustahab. ثانيا أن الأمر الإمام عليه السلام نفسه وولده ولده لا يدل على الوجوب على الجميع. Imam says we do it. It doesn't mean that other people should do it. There is also a problem that is raised by some people that they say this Sahihah talks about 1 month or 40 days of Ighma. Fasting is only for a month. So they wanted to say this Sahihah would not be applicable to what? To fasting. But this is not a good objection. Why? Because this person is 1 month, 40 days in Ighma. Salat for the whole period, and maybe part of it falls in the month of Ramadan. So for that period, also he missed Salah, Sawm. There's no problem. It doesn't say that it has to be 40 days the same way. قد أشكل بأنها منصرفة عن الصوم. منصرفة عن الصوم means it doesn't include Sawm. انصرف إلى means it's turning towards something, but عن الصوم is turning away from something. Insaraf means the zuhur is munsarif, and this means doesn't include. So why they said this? Is la yakunu 40 yawman, because Sawm cannot be for 40 days. So if it's talking about qaza, must be qaza of salat. Salat can be 40 days, 50 days, 365 days, but Sawm no. But this ishkal is rejected by what? احتمال أن يكون المقصود من أغمي عليها 40 يوما وصادف بعضها أيام شهر رمضان. The question might be that this was a person who was unconscious for 40 days. Some of these 40 days coincided months of Ramadan. Some people wanted to question sanad of this Sahihah. We said it is Sahihah. Some people wanted to question sanad, the chain of narrators. They say Ibrahim ibn Hashim is not verified. You know, Sheikh Kulayni, one of the Sheikhs, masters of Sheikh Kulayni, is Ali ibn Ibrahim. An Abi means Ibrahim ibn Hashim. Ali ibn Ibrahim, teacher of Sheikh Kulayni, is the one who has compiled Tafsir Ali ibn Ibrahim Qummi. The Tafsir al-Rawai, it's very famous, very respected. And he quotes many times in his tafsir from his father, Ibrahim ibn Hashim. Ibrahim ibn Hashim is not mentioned in the books of Rijal as someone who is verified. They didn't talk about his reliability. Some people say, so maybe we cannot accept his hadith. But on the other hand, ulama say, no, he was so great. He was so great that there was no need to verify him. If you want Tawthiqa Amma, we have about him. In Kamil al-Ziyarat by Ibn Qulaway, there is hadith from him. And you know, Ibn Qulaway says, I only quote hadiths which are from reliable narrators. Ali ibn Ibrahim in his tafsir also says that I quote from reliable sources, and he quotes from his father. Sheikh Kulayni in Al-Kafi quotes from Ali ibn Ibrahim from his father. And this man was so great that he connected the school of hadith of Kufa with the school of hadith of Qum. You know, Qummiyun were very careful about hadith. If someone was quoting weak hadith, they would ask him to leave the city of Qum. Ibrahim ibn Hashim moved to Qum and quoted many hadiths of Kufa from people, narrators of Kufa, and he was okay, he was welcomed, and he became Kufi and Qummi. Now we say for his son Ali ibn Ibrahim Qummi. In some sources they say he was the first person who spread the hadith of Kufin in Qum. He was one of the students of Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. If you remember in the discussion about ijtihad, we had this hadith, Afa Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman, thiqatun akhudhu anhu ma'alim ad-dini. And Imam alayhi salam said, yes. Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman was one of the companions of Imam Raza alayhi salam, and Ibrahim ibn Hashim was one of his students. And it is said that maybe among our narrators, no one reaches the position of Ibrahim ibn Hashim. And so we are not surprised that he is not verified in the books of Rajal, or not discussed in the books of Rajal, because he was beyond this kind of things. He had about 160 mashayikh, masters in Kufa, received lots of hadith from them, and then in Qum, he shared it with the people of Qum. This is not a good objection to say that the hadith is za'if because of Ibrahim ibn Hashim. Or some people say it's za'if because it says an ghayr wahidin, from more than one. And they say, we don't know who is one, this is mursal. Sheikh Irwani says, Amma Ibrahim ibn Hashim, fahuwa thiqatun. Ibrahim ibn Hashim is thiqah. Why? لرواية ولده عن في تفسيره. أولا, first, because his son Ali ibn Ibrahim in his tafsir quotes from Ibrahim ibn Hashim, from his father. If you accept this as a Tawthiqa Am, you know, Tawthiqat Am. Tawthiqat Am are not about specific people. It means that there is a general way, like any person who occurs in the chains of narrations in Kamil al-Ziyarat. Also here in Tafsir Imran, because he says in introduction that he quotes from reliable people. Our great ulama frequently narrated from him. Sheikh Kulayni has narrated hundreds of hadiths in whose chain there is Ibrahim ibn Hashim. Or thirdly, لأن تمكنه من نشر حديث الكوفيين بقوم يدل على سمو مكانته. The fact that he was able to spread the hadith of Kufiyin in Qum shows that he had high position. Otherwise, Qummiyun were not allowing every person to quote hadith, from Ahlul Bayt, if it was from sources which are not reliable. The second issue, you said غير واحدين, because the name is not mentioned, so it is مرسله. Say no, غير واحد normally is more than 2, means 3 or above. Because if it is 1, we say واحد. If it is 2, they can say اثنين. When they say غير واحد, normally means 3 plus. When from 3 parallel sources something is narrated, it means that it's again certain. We are sure. is مصداقها مصداق هذه العبارة عبارة غير واحد and غير واحد 3 فما فوق 3 plus وعادة ordinarily يحصل الاطمئنان من العدد المذكور. Imagine narrators reach a point that then there are 3 parallel or 4 parallel ways of narrating this hadith. So we can have اطمئنان. اطمئنان means even if it is not 100%, it's not yaqeen, it's close to yaqeen. لعدم احتمال التباطؤ or تواتي or تواتؤ على الكذب. If it is Hamza, we say تواتؤ. If it Hamza becomes مخفف and it becomes ya, we say tabati. There is no possibility of tabato. Tabato means agreeing. Like people agree to do something mistake and something wrong, or not to make a plot. There is no possibility of agreeing on kizb. All of them wanted to say something which is a lie. بل قد يدعى أن التعبير المذكور يوحي بوضوح الآن. Indeed, ulama, when they said عن غير واحد, they meant that this is very clear. They didn't bother to mention the names because it was clear. There was no need for mentioning the names. Oh, this is one hadith. So we say it is sahih, but the problem was not sanad. The problem was Imam Sadiq, when he says, I make it necessary for myself, my children, doesn't mean that it is wajib for us. So it is zahir fil wujub at most it is zahir. The other one was sarih fi nafi al-wujub. The second hadith, we said there are 2 hadiths that zahir fil wujub has stand. They are, according to the man al-zahiri, indicating wujub. رواية حفص بن البختري عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام يغضل مغمى عليه ما فات. Whoever was unconscious, he should do qadha. He does qadha. It's a ikhbar, but from ikhbar you can understand insha. Like for example, someone asks question, Imam says yu'idu salatahu, means he must yu'id, he must repeat. Oh, this hadith we didn't say sahiha. The first one we said sahiha. If you go back, we said Sahihatu Mansur ibn Hazim. But this one, Sani, we don't say Sahih. We said Riwaya. Why? Al-Jawab Anna Tariq al-Sheikh ila Hafs Za'ifun. This is narrated by Sheikh, and it seems that it is Sheikh Tusi. Because here it is quoted from Wasa'il al-Shi'a, so it's not from Kutub Arba, but I think he means Sheikh Tusi. Rizwanullah ta'ala. Sheikh Tusi, as we discussed before in Mashikhe, he mentions that what is the sanad between him and the first person in the chain, because sometimes he quotes from their books. And he mentions sanad, in the sanad, the name of the person who had that book. But in order to make sanad complete, he has said elsewhere that whatever I quote from this person is through this chain. He was very, mashallah, great in following methodology. His tariq is za'if to Hafs. And even if we compromise about this problem of sanad, يقضي at most is zahir fil wujub, at most. But the other hadith that we had was zahirun fi adam al-wujub. So again, we have to prioritize adam al-wujub and say this at most means istihbab. ومع قطع النظر يعني قطع النظر عن الإشكال في السند يلزم حملها على الاستحباب لما تقدم جمع عرفي we said. There is sarih and zahir. هذا. Take what we said so far. Now, if you remember, we said mashhur say there is no qadha for mughma alayh. Opposite to mashhur, Sheikh Mufid, Sayyid Murtaza, Sallar, Ibn al-Barraj, they made distinction. They said if he had niyyah before ighma for fasting, fasting is okay and there is no qadha. But if he didn't have niyyah, he should do qadha. Okay? Now we want to talk about that distinction, tafsil. وقد استدل للتفصيل المتقدم on behalf of غير مشهور, on behalf of Mufid and Sayyid Murtaza and Sallar and Ibn al-Barraj بأنه مع تقدم النية لا خلل في الصوم. If this person had niyyah, for example, I told you at 9 o'clock he became unconscious. Before that he had niyyah. They said, oh, there is no problem in fasting. He didn't eat, he didn't drink. He had niyyah, which is necessary. And he started his day with niyyah, and then he went unconscious. They say Sawm is okay, Aslan. There's no need for qadha because Sawm is okay. This is their argument, or according to some people who wanted to argue on their behalf. لعدم الدليل الاعتبار أكثر من ذلك فيها. There is no dalil that when there is niyyah, we need anything more than this. But ma adamiha, but if there was no niyyah, yalzamul qadha. غير مشهور said qadha is needed if there was no niyyah. Why? Because then this person is like someone who was ill. All the day he was ill. We have arguments, we have references which says Mariz after months of Ramadan should do qadha. So this person also should do qadha. لأن الإغماء مرض, a kind of illness, فيشمله ما دل على وجوب القضاء على المريض. So whatever we have about qadha for mariz includes mughma alayh as well. وما دل على لزوم قضاء الصلاة على المغمى عليه. Also, whatever is about salat for mughma alayh, they say we can generalize it to include Sawm as well. Not because it is qiyas, no, because we do tanqih manat. Tanqih manat means that if faqih is 100% sure that the same point, the same criteria exists in both cases, and he knows that this criteria is the reason for hukm, he can generalize, he can exclude or include. So if someone is sure, if faqih, mujtahid, not ordinary person, not muqaddad, if faqih is sure that there is no difference here between fasting and Sawm, then dalils and arguments that we have for qaza, for salat, we can extend it to qaza for Sawm. But there are problems. يرد الأول أنه على تقدير تمامية الصغرى يلزم استثناء الإغماء من المرض. They said إغماء is a kind of marad. You say, okay, even if we accept that إغماء is a kind of marad, a kind of illness, in some places we have to exclude it. If generally speaking, We say according to Orf, Ighma is a kind of illness. Still, even if you accept this, يلزم استثناء الإغماء من المرض. In our case, we have to exclude it from maraz. If you say it's not maraz, aslan, there is no problem. But if you say it's maraz, we say we have to exclude it here. We cannot apply things which are for maraz, for illness, to Ighma. Why? Because we have a specific Sahih Ayyub ibn Nuh, which says there is no qaza for mughma alayh. So when you have a specific reason, this should be prioritized. Ala taqdir tamamiyat as-sughra, according to the assumption that yes, Ighma is illness. Even if you accept that, يلزم استثناء الإغماء من المرض لصحيحة أيوب المتقدمة ونحوها. If you remember, at the end we said وغيرها. It's not only Sahih Ayyub ibn Nuh. ومع قطع النظر يلزم القضاء في صورة تقدم النية أيضا. And if we disregard that, then if you want to say, for some reason, I don't want to accept Sahih Ayyub ibn Nuh, or why you are making distinction between Niyya being there or not being there? If he's ill, he should not fast and shouldn't make any difference. And later he should do qadha. As-thani, the second, because we said yaruddu al-awwal wa thani, yani yaruddu al-thani. The second thing that they said was what? To use what we have about salat, qaza or salat for mughma alay, for qaza or som for mughma alay. Sheikh Irwani says, Lo sallamna adam al-farq. First, we don't accept it, first of all. We say salat is something, som is something else. Sometimes maybe they have similar ahkam, sometimes they may not have similar ahkam. For example, a lady who is in her period doesn't do qaza of salat, but does qaza of fasting. Okay, can be differences. But if faqih is sure that there is no farq, no distinction between fasting and salat in this case, but still we have to go to those nusus which says that qadha is needed even for salat, and say then it becomes mustahab, if you accept, of course, that they are similar. Because we have Sahih Ayyub, which is very clear that there is no need for qadha. I hope you remember, again, I go back to page 477. We said, Sahihatu Ayyub ibn Nuh, كتبت إلى أبي الحسن الثالث إمام هادي عليه السلام أسأله عن المغمى على يوما أو أكثر هل يقضي ما فاتهم لا? Imam said لا يقضي الصوم ولا يقضي الصلاة. Very clear, and it is Sahih. وأما الإغماء الاختياري, like I told you, someone agrees with doctor hospital that they do operation on him in the month of Ramadan when he was fasting. اختياري is intentional. كما لو أجريت لشخص عملية جراحية باختياره. There's a surgery operation according to his decision. فقد يقال بعدم شمول تلك النصوص له. Sometimes it is said that the nusus which we have for Ighma would not include such a person. My mobile went off. It's not recording. Okay, is it recording on Zoom?
Yes, it should be recording.
Or shall we stop maybe? Maybe we can stop.
Yeah, it says recording.
Okay. Maybe we can stop here because if I take Zoom and this would be, or if you are okay, we can finish it till we reach Hukm al-Kafir. What do you think?
It's your choice. No problem.
Okay. Okay, let us complete the discussion. So, فقد يقال بعدم شمول تلك النصوص له. Some say the text that we have, hadith which we have, for إغماء doesn't include إغماء اختياري when it's intentional. And they mention 2 points. Point 1, انصرافها إلى القهر. Those nusus, they automatically go towards what is out of control. I mean, without control, without decision, something which is by force. Because in the time of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, maybe there was no such a thing as Ighma ikhtiyari, and at least even if it was very uncommon. And when people hear someone is ughmi alay, they understood it out of control. I mean, without control. The second thing is that we said we have a rule. If you remember, we mentioned 3 points. One of them was that كُلَّمَا غَلَبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. And here, this person had his own choice. You cannot say Allah was dominant and he had no control. So this also doesn't apply. وَفِيهِ أَنَّ دَعْبَ الْإِنصِرَافِ. Now the answer. دَعْبَ الْإِنصِرَافِ وَإِنْ كَانَتْ غَيْرَ بَعِيدَةٍ. Sheikh Irwani says, yes, the claim that it is munsarif to qahri is not unlikely. Because in that time, it was not common. إلا أن ما ذكر في الوجه الثاني مرفوض. But what has been said in the second point is not accepted. So the first he accepts, the second he says we don't accept. Marfuz means is refused, rejected. Why? Because although this person decided to have operation when he was supposed to fast, okay, there's ikhtiyar. But was he ill or not? If he was ill and there was need for surgery, Sheikh Irwani says we can say he was mustar. He had to do this. Of course, if you say that he could do it after months of Ramadan, then this argument is not complete. It is answer of Sheikh Irwani is complete if there is istirar, there is emergency, and he had to do surgery quickly. فإنه مع الاضطرار إلى إجراء العملية الجراحية يصدق عرفاً عنوان ما غلب الله عليه. Still, we can say this is something that Allah was dominant and Allah had decided in a takwini way that this happens. ألا أنه يكفي التمسك بالبراءة بعد القصور في المقتضي. But even if you are not happy with these things, at least when there is no muqtazi is not including, this is not complete muqtazi for qadha. Or we say asalatul bara means there is no wujub for qadha. إن قلت كيف يدعى الانصراف. If someone says, I have problem with insiraf, because we said in time of imams, Ighma was not, something that you could do it by your decision, ask doctor to do it. Someone says, I don't accept insiraf to qahri, because Imam alayhi salam was aware that in future, people could do such things with their own decision. So he wants to say, Imam's answer considers future. Oh, as you know, this is not a good point, because yes, Imam knows future, but the language that Imam speaks is the language of people of that time. And when in that time was saying, said, "Ughmi alayh," it was bringing to their mind that it's not by choice. قلت إن لفظ المغمى عليه من كلام السائل دون الإمام. First of all, مغمى عليه was said by the person who asked the question. Secondly, ربما يقال لا ينبغي تحميل كلام الإمام أكثر مما تساعد عليه أساليب المحاورة العرفية. We cannot interpret a speech of Imam and put such meaning in an interpretation to it أكثر, more than what styles of common conversations can suit and accept. So side means help, means more than what was common styles of conversation. You cannot force the word of Imam. وهي تقتضي قصر النظر على الإغماء القهري. What was أساليب المحاورة العرفية at that time requires that we limit our attention and our glance or look to إغماء قهري, unintentional. لأنه الحالة المعروفة آنذاك. In that time, this was what was known, this condition. فلا حاجة إلى التقييد بها بعد عدم تداول غيرها. So there is no need for restricting and saying that this is for that, when something other than that was not even in the minds of people. So we are not doing taqeed. It by itself is munsarif to this. Okay, so alhamdulillah, we discussed about sabi, majnoon, and mughma alay. All these three groups of people, after they become baligh or become aqil or become conscious, they don't need to do qada of what they missed, according to either all our ulama or mashhur of our ulama. The fourth group is about kafir. We discuss it inshallah next session. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.